We're now going to take a look at the lifecycle methods onResume and onStop of our address book activity. Now, the onResume method is going to get called in this app when the activity is brought back to the foreground after having previously been pushed to the background, probably because some other activity was brought to the foreground. And in that case, what we want to do is repopulate the contacts list in the list view that's displayed on the address book activity. So to do that, here at line 48, we create a new instance of our class getContacts task, which, as you'll see in the next video, is defined starting here at line 64 as a subclass of async task. An async task is something that executes in a separate thread of execution and is capable of then returning results back to the GUI thread of execution. And the reason we want to do that is as follows. Getting the contacts out of the database could be a time-consuming operation, and as such should not be performed on the GUI thread of execution, because we don't want to get to a point where we get an application not responding dialog and the user simply goes and kills our app. So in this case, what we're going to do is create a new getContacts task, which is going to create a new task to execute in a separate thread. We then invoke its execute method, which takes as an argument an object array representing any parameters that need to be passed into the task. In this case, we have none, so we give it an object array cast of the null value that allows us to simply say that this task has no arguments. That will then kick off and execute that separate task, and whenever it's done getting the list of contacts, it will return those results, as you'll see in the next video, back to the GUI thread of execution for display in the list activity. And because it's done in a separate thread, the user interface remains responsive to the user and they can interact with it as necessary. Now, the onStop method will get called when the activity is being sent into the background because another activity is being brought to the foreground. And in that case, we don't need the cursor anymore that was used to display the data in the list view, and we don't really need the list view at that point either, because it's not going to be visible to the user. Now, the key thing we want to do in this case is get rid of the resources that are associated with the database cursor. So what we do first here at line 54 is we get the cursor from the contact adapter, the simple cursor adapter we created back in the onCreate method. We call getCursor to get that. We make sure that it's not equal to null, and if it's not, we say cursor.deactivate, which deactivates the cursor, in other words, releasing the resources for that cursor so that we're not occupying those resources on our device. Then at line 59, we say to the contact adapter, change your cursor to null, which means you don't have a cursor, at which point the list view would not display any data, and we then call the superclasses onStop method to complete the onStop function call.